Gemstone pockets contain giant crystals of colorful gems. They're basically nature's treasure troves that can be worth thousands to even hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars in each pocket. Would you like to learn more about these super valuable gem deposits? Would you like to learn where you can find them and how you can discover them in the field? Well, join me as we take a deep dive into the secrets of valuable gemstone pockets and unravel the mysteries surrounding these crystal-rich deposits. I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and today we are exploring the secrets of where precious gemstones are both formed and found. And we also take a look at places where they've been found in the past and where you might find some in the future. Aquamarine, tourmaline, topaz, kunzite, garnet, morganite, and emerald are only a few of the kinds of gems that are found in these sorts of deposits. There are a couple of types of these remarkable deposits. One is what geologists call pegmatites. We're going to talk about those first. And the other is the metallic bearing veins, metal bearing veins. These are actually the same veins that they mine, gold and silver, lead and copper and other metals out of. Sometimes, if you're in the right conditions, these can have also amazing crystal deposits and giant crystals of both gemstones and collector value minerals. There are numerous discoveries of both types where single pockets in these types of environments have formed crystals that, between the gemstones and the crystal specimens, have been valued at more than $1 million. So they're well worth going after. Let's take a look at some of these gemstones and the crystals that are found with them.
This is a beautiful set of blue aquamarine crystals on a matrix of mica, and in fact, almost all aquamarine comes from pegmatite deposits. Morganite, the pink form of the mineral beryl, also comes from pegmatite deposits. Even some green emerald beryl also comes from pegmatite deposits. Kunzite, the beautiful form of spodumene that's suitable for gems and, of course, wonderful mineral specimens, comes from pockets in pegmatites. A considerable amount of topaz in blue and, of course, in other colors as well also is coming from pegmatite pockets. But perhaps the best-known pegmatite gem, both for fantastic mineral specimens and for beautiful gemstones, is tourmaline. It's highly valued for its jewelry uses, and it can be found in good-sized stones. It comes in virtually every color of the rainbow, from blues to beautiful shades of green, as in this specimen from Brazil. It even comes in specimens that have more than one color in a single stone. But in addition to the beautiful gem usage of tourmaline, it also makes for some very spectacular crystal specimens. This specimen that you're looking at was mined in San Diego County in the early 1970s. And it came out of a big pocket, and this specimen by itself is worth well over $100,000. And it wasn't the only specimen to come out of that pocket. And in fact, this specimen, plus the others that were in it, plus the gems that came out, that pocket was worth well over $1 million in today's money. And so you can see, hunting for pockets in pegmatites can be very lucrative.
But before we get started, let's talk about why open spaces in these deposits, basically pockets or voids, there's different names from cavities, that people, why are these open spaces so important to growing really spectacular crystals? Well, if you want to form crystals of high perfection and good condition and, showing the crystal forms to their highest, you need the open spaces to grow into. Literally, if you have crystals growing one against each other and fighting about, or whether they don't even have any open space to grow into, you're going to end up with crystals that are cracked, they have inclusions, they have junk in them, and they're just not going to be as valuable. If you want the best form of crystals, the ones that really show the crystal to perfection, you need the open space for the crystal to grow into when it's in its growing stage. And that's why always the best crystals will be found in these open space voids. Think of a geode. A geode is kind of like that. Here's a geode that I found. Now this one only has a little tiny space in the middle that has crystals, but all around it is kind of agate and kind of crystals that are growing together, but they're not the best. But in the very center, where there's an open space in this geode, there is the best crystals. And in fact, in this one, if you were able to see it up close, the little crystals in the very center actually have a little bit of an amethyst color to them. And that's the same concept that we're talking about with these open spaces for crystal and gemstone pockets. Now, finding these pockets offer the greatest potential for significant return on any investment of time and money in mining and searching for these things. Because if you find one, and it's a good one, it can be worth huge amounts of money. Now, the pockets are usually small, and pockets larger than a meter or a yard are kind of rare, but some of those big pockets have produced some of the most spectacular, world-famous examples of gemstones yet ever discovered. Let's take a look at some examples.
So here's another geode, and you can see it up close. You can see around the outer edge of the geode, there's really not well-formed crystals. Things are small, but as you get closer and closer to the center, things look better. And in the very center, the crystals are well-formed and well-colored, and the best quality material is at the edge of the open space. Here's a probably 500-pound specimen of quartz crystals from a pegmatite pocket, and you can see these giant smoky quartz crystals. You can tell that if you have a big enough open space and the right conditions to grow in, you can grow some really fantastically large crystals. And this photo shows what can happen if you have the right conditions and a really big open space. You know, this looks like some kind of Photoshop special where they just put a standing man in there. But this actually really is a real place in Mexico. They broke into this giant cavern some years back, and it's huge, and there's crystals in there that are 20 feet long and more, because there was a huge space and the right conditions for the crystals to grow into.
Let's talk now about the pegmatites and the kinds of rocks that they are. This is actually an example of a piece of a pegmatite rock, a pegmatite dike. Basically, it forms kind of like a vein. And this is actually a piece of the dike from the most productive gem deposit in the entire USA. It's from the Himalaya pegmatite in San Diego County, California. I visited there many years ago. Now, the black you can see here are little crystals of tourmaline, and this flat space is where it intruded in a crack in a fault in the country rock that surrounds it. And toward the middle of this vein, and it's really only about 3 feet thick, are gem tourmalines and morganites and all kinds of other gemstones. What makes pegmatites different is the coarseness of the rock. You can't really see well here, but you know, instead of like in a granite or some diorite or some other kind of similar intrusive rock, you know, you have crystals that are little tiny. But in pegmatites, you have the same generally kind of crystals, at least a lot of the dike is made of those crystals. But they're big. They can be a few inches to a few feet, sometimes tens of feet in size in pegmatite dikes. They also tend to contain unusual minerals, and minerals formed from rare elements. How this thing works is that as a big body of magma, let's say, you know, it's going to cool to be a diorite or a granite or something, and it's cooling slowly well below the surface of the earth. As it cools, certain elements in that big body of molten rock fit well into the crystals that are grown, into feldspars, micas, quartz, and some other minerals that are common in these types of rocks. But other elements just don't fit in. And so they can't get into the crystals as the crystals are growing. You know, you think of a granite with little tiny crystals. Well, they can't fit in. And so they're left out. And as the thing cools and cools and cools, this body of left out misfit elements becomes concentrated, becomes more and more. And this includes water and things like lithium or boron. They just don't fit into the common rock making elements. And so at the very end, in the last stages of the solidification of this big body of magma, you have left over water and these unusual elements. And sometimes they give rise to the formation of unusually large, even in a pegmatite where a lot of the crystals are several inches in size, the last stages, because they have water in them and can provide this unique, good environment for crystals to grow, you get giant crystals of things that are gems. I mentioned lithium, and actually pegmatite dikes are one of the main sources of the element lithium. Now there's gemstones that have lithium in it, and we're kind of focusing on gemstone pockets, but in other mines where there's pegmatites, you can find large quantities of lithium that gets mined for the lithium metal and processed for that. But we're going to focus on gemstones. So pegmatites are a little bit unusual, and they have these unusual elements in them that you don't find in normal rocks. Let's take a closer look. I'm going to give you a close-up of this rock and some others, and take a look at some diagrams, and we'll talk about it further.
Here's a close-up view of the rock I was holding in my hand, and the flat bottom that you can see, there's a thin border zone about a ½ inch wide, and then there's some smaller crystals, and then as you move up to the top of the rock, the crystals just generally get larger and larger. The white is feldspar, the black is schorl tourmaline, scoral, and then the kind of gray color in there is quartz, and sparklies are mica as well. Here is a view of that same pegmatite body, the Himalaya pegmatite in San Diego County. And you can see at the top is the flat, and it's the contact with the country rock. And then there's a border zone, and as it grows down, the crystals tend to get bigger and bigger as you approach the center of the photograph. And right in the middle of the photograph, the little bit the lower part of the middle, there's a white blob area. That's actually a pocket of a tourmaline. But this is the dike as it is in place underground in the mine. Here is a close-up photograph of a pegmatite from the East Coast, from the New England area. And as you can see by looking at it, it looks remarkably similar to the ones we were just looking at. But not all pegmatites are just a few feet thick. Here's a very old picture of me inside a mine that the pegmatite dike here is probably 40 to 50 feet thick. Here is a model that someone made of these kinds of systems, and you can see the igneous intrusive rock, the big body shown in various shades of brown here. And then in the final stages, the stuff that just doesn't fit into anything else gets squeezed up a lot of times into faults, but sometimes it just is a big blobby shaped body. And in the very core of this, you can find gem pockets, the openings that are shown in this little model. And here's a drawing that emphasizes how a lot of these pegmatite bodies tend to be zoned into different grades of rock. And in this drawing, there's a blue border zone, a pink wall zone, an albite zone, a green intermediate zone. And these are all much coarser than a granite or a diorite, but they're not the coarsest yet. The coarsest is in the core, and in the core area, you'll find large crystals of tourmaline and beryl, spodumene, which is a lithium mineral, and it's around the edges of the core, or sometimes in the center of the core, you will find the gem pockets that we're really looking for.
These pegmatite rocks, they're kind of rare, but they are widely scattered all over on the Earth's crust, and in some places they can actually be fairly abundant. Pegmatites tend to be the most common in particular geologic environments, mostly where igneous intrusive rocks like granite or gabbro, diorite, or metamorphic rocks are exposed at the surface. And as I've said, they may have large crystals in the solid part of the pegmatite, but the best crystals, the most perfect crystals, are going to be in the pockets. Unfortunately, of all the pegmatites in the world, only a comparatively small percentage have well-formed crystals in their center in the pockets. The valuable gems that are sought by gemologists and jewelry makers and mineral collectors occur almost exclusively in those pocket void spaces. Sometimes the spaces are partially clay-filled. By the time the miners get to them, or whoever's working gets to them, cracks in the rock may allow clay from the surface to seep down in and fill some of these void spaces. So actually cleaning them out sometimes is kind of messy. The gem-bearing pockets represent kind of the ultimate of exotic element, exotic mineral combinations that just aren't found anyplace else because of the unusual elements, the elements that tend to form fluxes with the water in the system to help encourage the growth of large crystals. And it's these environments that provide the best environment for the growth of large and perfect gem crystals. The pockets that are in the pegmatites tend to occur in the median, in the central part, in what's called the core zone, and they can occur both as single isolated pockets or a series, a chain of pockets that are kind of interconnected. Let's take a look at some pegmatite pockets, some actual pockets that you can take a peek and see what they look like.
Here's a guy working a tourmaline pocket at Mount Mica in Maine. And the little inset at the lower right, you can see the tourmaline crystal he was pulling out. It's basically tourmaline on quartz. He's being very careful to take the specimen out whole and not to break anything. Here's a couple of guys working another pocket also at Mount Mica in Maine. And this pocket's maybe the same size or slightly smaller, but this is a kind of a typical pocket size. But they do come larger. Now, this photograph is also from Mount Mica, but it's an old photograph from about 120 years ago. And you can see the size of this pocket. It's huge. It's big enough for a man to crawl into. Now, something like this would be a $1 million pocket if mined today. And the Mount Mica area is very famous for beautiful tourmaline crystals. Here's a close-up of a pocket that lets you see into the pocket and see what's in it. Now, in this particular pocket, the tourmaline crystals are not attached to the side well. They've kind of all fallen down and they're surrounded by this white-colored clay. But this is from the Himalaya pegmatite that I've mentioned a couple times in this video in San Diego County. And these are all good-sized pink to reddish colored tourmaline crystals, and basically they'll get picked out of the clay and then be valuable. This is basically a reconstruction of a pocket. It's not something that's actually still in a mine. They took the pieces out and then kind of put it back together without the clay and other things so that you could clearly see what was in the pocket. This would represent one of the other pegmatite areas in San Diego County, but you can see the big pink tourmaline crystals. Off to the left, there's some lavender colored material. That's a lepidolite, a lithium mica, of course, big quartz crystals, and some black colored tourmaline as well. But this gives you a feel for what a pocket would be if you removed the clay and cleaned it up and then took a look at it, when it was still pretty much in place. Of course, beautiful gem-bearing pegmatite pockets can be found all over in different places in the U.S., not just San Diego County or up in Maine. This is basically the wall or part of a pocket from the Mount Antero region in Colorado that's famous for its beautiful blue aquamarine crystals, and you can see them studded all over this piece of a pocket wall. This is a recreation of a gem pocket from the Pikes Peak region of Colorado. This particular part of Colorado produces beautiful specimens of blue to green amazonite feldspar and dark brown smoky quartz crystals. This is a gem pocket in a pegmatite in the state of Wisconsin. There are actually a number of lesser known beautiful gem pocket areas in various states that aren't so well known, and we'll talk about some of those a little bit later in this video. And as I've noted, there are pockets and gem pegmatites scattered here and there all over the globe, and we will get to some of the many different areas and taking a look at some maps a little bit later in the video. This particular one is from Russia.
So even if you found a body of this pegmatite rock, how would you know where to search for the gems? You just can't walk, oh, here's the middle, so that's where the pockets are going to be. It's more complex than that, because sometimes these things have shapes that are like a vein, that are long and narrow. Sometimes they're big, kind of blob shaped. They don't really have that kind of long and narrow characteristic to them. Sometimes, like I say, they're blob shaped, and it's hard to figure where the pockets are going to be. So how would you know? What would you do? What technique would you use to find out where these valuable pockets are going to be? There are actually a number of indicators that miners and prospectors who work these kinds of deposits use to indicate that there may be a valuable gem pocket nearby, perhaps inches or even only a few feet away. As I mentioned, the best place to search is the core part of the pegmatite. And usually the different layers of pegmatite have different kinds of minerals in them. So you can tell, oh, I'm in this part, I'm in the wall part, I'm getting in the middle part, I'm in the core part. And we'll show some diagrams to take a look at that. Pockets are usually located in the core, either in the core or around the edges of the core sometimes. Sometimes it's what's left between the next layer and the core. In between is where the pockets are. It's commonly observed that the crystal size of the minerals in the pegmatite will be enlarged as they approach the pocket zone. As you're approaching a pocket, maybe crystals that have been a couple, 2 or 3 inches in size will suddenly become 5, 6, 8, 10 inches in size as they approach a pocket. Color changes in the appearance of the minerals that make up the pegmatite can also be a great indicator. A lot of times, very common in a lot of pegmatites is black schorl tourmaline. This is a form of tourmaline that's rich in iron. It's not transparent. It still can make good mineral specimens sometimes, but it's common in the walls of many pegmatites. But as you approach a pocket, suddenly these black crystals that are opaque will start to turn pink or green, and the black will go away and pink or green will replace it. And it's actually along the length of a single crystal. As you're away from the pocket, black, less, starting to peel green, starting to be green, starting to turn pink. As you go along the length of the crystal, that indicates you're next to a pocket. Another mineral that's like that is amazonite feldspar, which may be pink or some other pale color, and as it gets close to the pocket, it starts to turn blue-green of amazonite. These kinds of changes are generally very strong indicators that you're next to a pocket. Also, coarser mica flakes or well-formed quartz crystals can also be a strong indicator. Instead of having just blobby shaped quartz that fits in between others, you start to actually see the forms of the crystal shape of the quartz. You start to see that as you get closer to the pocket. They may even start to turn clear from being opaque, or they may start to turn smoky colored instead of kind of a pale gray kind of color. So as you see the better formed crystals and the larger formed crystals, you know that you're getting closer to a pocket. Sometimes right next to the pocket, the pegmatite will actually be somewhat decomposed, and sometimes finding soft parts of a pegmatite that's in among harder parts will be an indication that you're near a pocket, and probing in there with a screwdriver or something else may lead you into a pocket. This works because a lot of times the pegmatite pocket zones tend to be more weathered and etched than the other more solid parts. Let's take a look at some photos.
Now, I actually showed you this picture previously, but you can see that The white clay is actually from the feldspar, and some of the chemicals that are in the pocket when it grows are actually kind of corrosive to the feldspar, and so you end up with, around the margins of the pocket, the feldspar may be partly altered to clay and be soft. So, like I say, you might be able to probe in with a screwdriver or some long device and see that there's an open space, a void, beyond these weak areas. This is another view of that Himalaya pegmatite in San Diego County, and the diagram shows that the pocket zone in this relatively narrow pegmatite is right along the center. Now, generally speaking, pegmatites are bigger than this, and the pocket zone will be at or near, not always exactly in the center line, but in the ballpark close. In this example, you can see that the tourmaline crystals get bigger as they get closer to the center of the pegmatite zone. The bottom of this specimen, the crystals are smaller. This is more against the wall rock, but as it grows, as the pocket develops, the crystals get larger and larger.
Now, there are loads of locations that you might successfully search for pegmatite gemstones. The gem-bearing pegmatites of Southern California, New England, Colorado, North Carolina, those are the best known ones in the United States. But there are lesser known areas of pegmatite deposits in the US, and these include places like the Sawtooth Batholith in central Idaho, Mason County in Texas, eastern Nevada, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and South Carolina as well. There are also several known pegmatite locations in Australia. Other productive locations from around the world include the Hindu Kush area of Afghanistan, Russia, Ukraine, Minas Gerais in Brazil. Of course, that's probably the biggest and most productive area on the planet. But also Nigeria, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, the Czech Republic, India, and Vietnam. You can see they're spread all over the world. There are also newly discovered, recently accessible areas in East Africa, Madagascar, and Afghanistan, and more discoveries will likely be made in the future, and new discoveries of new gem-bearing pegmatites are most likely to be made in igneous intrusive geologic environments where the pegmatite magmas crystallized at relatively shallow depths. Let's take a look at a map of some of the gem pegmatite locations worldwide.
Here's a map of some of the pegmatite deposits well known across the planet, and you can see there's quite a few in North America, but also Africa. This map doesn't show some of the really large numbers of pegmatites spread throughout Brazil, especially in Minas Gerais state. Of course, also some in Australia and China and elsewhere, but you know, there's other pegmatites, even ones I know of in North America, that aren't shown on this map. And so it's worth exploring and doing further investigation, to, especially if you do some searching on Google or other sources of information. You really can find a lot about the pegmatites of certain areas and the gems that they've yielded. If you want to get a full-size copy of that map, this is the USGS report it came out of. You can just search on Google and download a copy. It's Open File Report 2013-1008. This is a map of the gem-bearing pegmatites of San Diego County, but of course it extends up into Riverside County and actually even a little bit into Imperial County. You can see there's quite a few of them. A number of these have yielded some very nice gems. And the same is true there's maps out there for the New England pegmatites and other areas. You just need to do some research on Google and you can find probably whatever information you need to find.
Another type of valuable crystal pocket can be formed in some metal-bearing veins. Now, these can contain valuable minerals like rhodochrosite, fluorite, calcite, quartz, and various sulfide minerals like galena, sphalerite, or pyrite. Some of the crystals in these pockets have gemstone potential, while others will really be more valuable as collector specimens. So you'll want to keep both of these possibilities in mind when you're out collecting. These metal-bearing veins are formed from the activity of deep molten magma far below the surface, that drives heat to circulate waters. It's not volcanoes erupting on the surface. So if you have a volcano near you, that doesn't mean that you're in the thing for this. It's the hot molten rock down deep that gives off heat that drives these geologic systems. Now, some of them are super rich in metals. Of course, these are the kind of veins that get mined for gold or silver, copper, lead, zinc, and other metals as well. Because the mineral-rich waters that are driven by heat from down deep drive these hot waters through cracks and breaks in the rock. Oftentimes, these are fault zones and form veins. Now, most veins, honestly, do not contain the necessary open spaces to form really great crystal deposits. But some do. And the ones that do, like I say, can form some really unique and interesting mineral specimens and gemstones. In the past, the miners were going after those metals in these veins. And, if they found a beautiful crystal specimen with maybe some galena or some silver mineral, they would look at that and say, oh, throw that in the ore bin where it'll be crushed and silver and lead and whatever extracted. Today, that specimen might be worth 10,000 times more as a mineral specimen than it would be as if you extracted the silver and lead and whatever other metal values that were in the vein material. So you need to keep these kind of ideas in mind, because the old timers, you would be going after areas where the old timers mined for metals, but looking for places that had these open spaces, pockets that would be filled with crystals during the growth time of the vein. Because the old timers, didn't care about crystal specimens, this gives you an opportunity to collect valuable minerals that the old timers basically ignored or didn't care about. If they took out a piece and it had beautiful crystals, but no valuable silver or lead or whatever, they would just throw that out on the dump. That was junk. So these dumps can actually be a good place to look for nice mineral specimens these days. Let's take a look at some of the gems and minerals that are formed in these metallic veins and how the veins themselves form.
Fluoride, sometimes accompanied by calcite or various sulfide minerals, is one of the common things. And of course, the fluoride can be in very beautiful colors, a wide variety. Here's another fluorite crystal, of course, a completely different color and a different look to it. Fluorite sometimes can be found in pegmatite deposits too, and of course it comes in every color of the rainbow. Because these are metal-bearing veins, you also get, of course, metallic minerals like this gray metallic galena, contrasted against some beautiful white calcite crystals. In the old days, a specimen like this would have been tossed in the ore pile and crushed, and the silver and the lead in the galena would have been extracted. But today, it's much more valuable as a mineral specimen. Sometimes you would just get calcite crystals by themselves, and of course calcite can come in a variety of color and even crystal forms. A beautiful specimen like this would have been tossed out on the dump in the old days because there's no metallic minerals attached to it. Beautiful red to pink rhodochrosite, as shown here, is perhaps one of the most prized crystals that can be found in these types of deposits. They can be highly valued by collectors and even can be cut into gemstones. Here's a beautiful rhodochrosite gemstone cut from this material. It has such an amazing color. Here's a big, beautiful specimen of sphalerite, which is a zinc sulfide mineral and in the main ore of zinc, and then the white quartz. Finally, this specimen is gray tetrahedrite with white quartz crystals. Tetrahedrite is a little bit unusual mineral. It's a copper mineral that commonly has quite a bit of silver in it.
Because these are metal-bearing veins, honestly the best locations to search for these types of crystal deposits are in old mining districts, and there are many of these scattered throughout the world, in the western U.S., but all over the place, really. And all of these are places that you might begin your search. No guarantees that it's going to be a successful search, but it's a good place to get in and start looking. Like I say, you might look for historical indications of past mining for various metals, gold, silver, copper, and whatever, because these are the types of things that produce these crystal pockets that could be valuable. One of the best places to start your search, of course, is the old dumps. Like I say, the miners, if the vein had crystals in it, but it didn't have anything as far as metal values, that would go out in the waste pile on the dump. And it's probably still sitting there waiting for you to come take a look. When you go and look at places, like I say, not all of these veins, in fact, the majority of them do not have the open spaces to make good pockets. And so when you go search out these places, look at the different dumps. Look for crystals on the dump. Look for, rocks with a growth of crystals on the surface. Those are indications that that vein that was being worked at that mine had the kind of open spaces that were necessary to form good crystals. If you look through the whole dump and you don't see any indication of crystals or rocks covered with crystals or anything like that, it's probably time to move on to another mine dump. But these can be found in places even that you don't expect. I will tell you that I have found some really nice amethyst crystals, including some that are clean and clear enough to be cut as gemstones to about a carat-sized amethyst at the old Comstock Lode area up in Virginia City. Now there's hundreds of mines up there, and not everyone produces this kind of amethyst. I found a couple of places where I found really nice amethyst. So this is true for a lot of mining districts. You might look at one dump and say, meh, nothing good here. Look at another dump and say, meh, nothing good here. And third one you might look at and say, hey, this is the place. So dumps are a great place to start your search. Another great indicator is loose float crystals on the ground, on the side of a hill. You don't need an old mine dump. You can just be looking on the side of a hill for this type of stuff. Now, float is simply any rocks or crystals that have weathered out of their original location. In other words, Mother Nature has moved them via some process over time. Usually it's some sort of erosion. And I'll tell you that you can use this for pegmatites too, and I've found float tourmalines far from the original source of the dikes up on the side of the hill, down lower on the slope, because that's how erosion works. It brings the stuff down the side of the mountain from the top to the bottom to the valleys, and then washes out the valleys and the creeks and that sort of thing. So erosion is your friend to help you find crystals in this type of environment. The natural process of erosion, including rain, wind, ice, glaciers, and other things, can move crystals a long ways from their original source. The amount of wear on the crystals, do they look fresh and just like they came out of the pocket, or do they look like they've been tumbled and worn around some? The amount of wear and abrasion on the crystals can give you a good indication as to how far it's traveled. Let's take a look at some of these pockets from this type of vein and what they look like.
This is actually a recreation, but it's very much what you might see if you were looking into a pocket in a mine that had rhodochrosite, the pink there, quartz crystals, sulfide minerals. You can see that the pocket is long and narrow, and because the veins are shaped long and narrow, a lot of the pockets in the metallic veins also have this kind of long and narrow. They're big in 2 dimensions and shorter in the third, the width dimension. This is a pocket that's pretty much lined with all amethyst. There are a few little white calcite crystals in here, but this is an amethyst crystal pocket, and of course this would be very valuable. This is a giant plate from a crystal pocket with lots of rhodochrosite, and it emphasizes the fact that it may only be 8 or 10 inches thick, but the pocket can go up 8 or 10 feet like this, or be 5 or 6 feet wide, but only be 6 or 8 inches across. And so you end up with a lot of the specimens from these types of pockets being generally plate shaped like this one. Now, I showed an amethyst crystal pocket, but sometimes you'll get quartz crystals and they'll just be colorless rock crystal like this. But still, collections of quartz crystals like this can be quite valuable. Now, I had mentioned hunting mine dumps, and actually this crystal is from a pegmatite type mine dump, but still, there's a lot of good crystals that get tossed out on some of these dumps, and I picked this up off of a mine dump in San Diego County. It's a beautiful morganite crystal, good crystal form. Some small parts of this could probably even be cut into faceted gems, but I think it's more valuable, or at least it's more special to me as a specimen. But I just want to emphasize that these mine dumps really can, without going in the mine, just walking around on the surface, produce some really nice specimens.
Next, let's explore how miners extract these precious gems. In both pegmatites and in the metallic vein types of deposits, the crystals are found set in hard rock. And, you can't just grab them and break stuff. You want the crystals to be intact. And yet, because of the hard rock, they have to do some blasting. Usually the blasting is done with great care and very limited amounts of explosive. But in a lot of cases, pry bars and screwdrivers, hammers and chisels are the tools to extract these things from their host rock. You want to preserve the crystal as much as possible. If you've got multiple crystals in a matrix, you want to preserve the crystals in the matrix because those specimens are far more valuable to a collector. So if you do make a big discovery in some of these, and I hope you do, be very careful about how you extract them. Use the utmost of care to not break things. Now, exploration and discovery is a skill set, and to help you learn all the different facets of this skill, I wrote a book, and it's called Fistful of Gold. Now, it's about exploring and growing in the knowledge you need to help you be successful in finding and searching things in the field. Now, it's mainly about gold, I'll admit that's in the title, but it also has a lot of other good information about metallic veins, about geology, mineral identification, and other related topics that will be useful to you. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now.
So this is my book, Fistful of Gold. You can see it's an encyclopedia distilling down my 45 plus years of prospecting experience plus my degree into the parts that you need to know. I spent most of 10 years writing this. It was not just a simple effort that, I sat down and wrote it. You can see it's like 250,000 words. It's not something you're going to read through in a day or maybe even a week or more. But it's got a lot of information and reference material that you can come back to. You can read it once and read it again and get more out of it because there's just that much depth of material in this. I wrote this book because I want you to have the skills to go out and find fistfuls of gold for yourself. And if you have the skills and know what you're doing and get out in the field and make a real effort, you can find significant gold. It's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that because, gold, it wouldn't be, close to $2,000 an ounce, which is what it is right now. It wouldn't be so expensive if it was easy to find. It's not easy. You just can't walk out into an old gold field and start picking up nuggets. If the gold was easy to see and find, the old timers would have picked it up and taken it themselves. So you got to have skill. You got to know what you're doing. You got to be able to master what it takes to find gold, and you've got to have the persistence and put in the effort to find the material, to find the gold or diamonds or gemstones that you're looking for. Now, this book has geology, it has facts about gold, it has stuff about diamonds and platinum, but it's mostly about gold deposits, how gold deposits form, how placer and nuggets form, all the questions you've probably wanted to ask. The book is available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but you can look up on Amazon, Fistful of Gold, by Chris Ralph, and find this book. Now, the book, if you look on it, it has a very high rating. It has like a 4.7 or 4.8 out of 5, which is really high. I mean, it's hard to please everybody, but I'm close to a 5 out of 5, not far from it, right? So it's been out. I've sold more than 15,000 copies of this book, And I've had tremendous response, tremendous positive response by the people who buy it. And I think if you buy it, you'll be just as happy with it. Now, in addition to my book, I also have a website that I do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my website and show you some images from the website right now.
Now, my website is nevadaoutbackgems.com, and I'll put a link to the prospecting page, this prospecting encyclopedia page, down in the description below, but you can find it at Nevada Outback Gems. I sell some jewelry, turquoise, other gemstones there. I don't always keep the inventory perfectly up to date, so if you're interested in anything you see, do contact me first before trying to send me money or anything, because I want you to be able to get what you order. But the website has lots of different stories, old adventures, even some stories, true stories from the old-time miners of the 1800s. So I think it's something you'll find interesting.
The other thing I want to go back to is that all my comments, I want you guys to ask questions on the comments for my videos. I answer 100% of the comments that are made on my videos. Now, sometimes if somebody just says, hey, great video, I really enjoyed it, the comment may just be, well, I'm really glad you liked it. Or if it's a simple question, and sometimes I get people who ask me questions, it would take a book to answer that question, and I recommend that they just buy the book. But I answer all my questions. I try to help people as much as I can. I'm here to help you. So if you're interested in gaining the skills, if you're interested in knowing what you need to know to be successful, follow along with me. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that they'll let you know when I come out with new videos, and I try to do that pretty much every Saturday morning. And you'll enjoy with me, you'll come along with me, we'll have an adventure together, and we will find some nice gold and see what it's really like getting out in the woods, or the deserts, or the mountains, wherever we land, wherever the gold is, wherever the diamonds are, wherever the platinum is. Come along, we'll have some fun. And I'll see you real soon on the next video.